I am your host, Dan Morris, Key Account Director at Crystal Specialist Finance. I am joined by the legend himself, the man that needs no introduction, John Pony, the tax wizard, John McCaffrey, Alexander Inco, who is the star attraction of these events, who knows everything around tax and more, to be honest. I'm also joined by this other chap who needs no introduction, Roger Morris, the Green Lender, Tandem Bank, Mr. Social Media. Morning, gents. How are we?
We're really good. And really looking forward to today. We've got a number of questions in already. So really, we would like any of the questions you've got at the moment to put in the chat facility and we'll answer them out. But Dan, really good. 5 years in, and it shows the value of these. And I think it's another record attendance and registrations. John, how are you feeling?
I'm doing all right. 5 years in, I'm feeling quite old.
Looking quite young, but
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. What a 5 years it's been. Before we get into the session, which as always, if we can have as much audience participation as possible, that would be amazing, because you get out of these sessions what you want to ask, please do, whether it's around taxation, the lender side of things, the broker side of things, the general market, or answer any question, and hopefully we'll be able to answer it for you. Before we jump into the questions that we've been asked prior, we're nearly in March, but how was the year started? You, Roger, what's it been like compared to last year?
Yeah, so we've made some significant investment with the feedback from brokers when it comes to first-time buyers. So Tandem Bank's residential offering is really focusing on first-time buyers. Doing 90% LTV is a significant step, but also allowing the deposit to come from either a family gift, and we're talking that wider family, or an equity gift from the family. We're seeing a lot of grandparents wanting to sell the buy-to-lets and give the equity to the grandchildren, or from a personal loan. There's maybe only 3 lenders I can think of that will allow a personal loan as deposit, Dan. We've also just launched, breaking news, our affordability calculator, the new improved version. So those that were trying to maybe get a clearer of understanding, and we've made some significant changes, criteria and policy, but I can't give you any more of that, lender, in some form of financial promotion. But we've done really well. And if you haven't registered, Dan, my final comment would be, please get registered with us, and any help or assistance you want, go through the Crystal packaging desk, because the guys in Tamworth really know our criteria and policy, and we'd also always advocate going through a packager than coming direct. But you do have that choice. John?
Well, I've just finished the busy time of my year, so we've had tax return season, which was a little bit epic, I have to say, and more of the same. Entrepreneurs are still busy. I hear the economy is contracting a little bit. I'm not seeing it in terms of people undertaking things. There are still entrepreneurs, plenty of property entrepreneurs looking to sort out the businesses, incorporate, restructure, and lots going on.
And Dan, what about you? How's Crystal started off the year?
Yeah, do you know what? For us, it's been a really, really fast start. We've had, for the past 2 months now, record inquiry months, record application months. We just need lenders to come more. It's been a really fast start. More and more people are starting to diversify, and our education and our content this year and what we're supporting with is diversity. We say it all the time. We've said it in the past few webinars that we've done and events that we've attended. If you're wanting your income levels to increase back to pre-23, even pre-22 levels, people are going to have to diversify. So get away from the residential and buy-to-let market, that being flat, diversify commercial space, bridging space, development space, even second charge space. There's a ton of business out there. It's just, what business do you want to do? If you don't want to do it, who do you partner up with, whether it's ourselves or someone else, who can assist you with those transactions, increase your turnover, create new opportunities for you, more importantly, help clients with more solutions. So I'll leave you a bit of food for thought for that. But there's more people gearing up to diversify their businesses in 24. If we can support you in any way, shape or form, then reach out after this webinar. But yeah, really good start, really fast start. I think we'll all agree that, as much as we are now officially in a recession, essentially, I certainly think the property market is starting to pick up. We certainly see transaction levels increase. John will probably agree with that as well. Tax advice.
I think we're seeing the new build market now. We've got the end of Help to Buy moving into shared ownership. We're seeing much more availability of shared ownership properties. So that's going to be another great area to be able to, for young aspiring people to get on the property ladder, specifically inside the M25, but outside the country, or outside of London, that's certainly changing. But more than ever, I know that you guys, your every case is becoming specialist. Every customer you speak to now has got some unusuality in needing to be able to use two lots of income. So we'll happily use the second income as long as it's been in place, then for at least 6 months, be able to add the two together, and also being able to use up to 30% of the overall family's household income from support from the government within universal credit. So lots of different ways that specialist lenders are stepping into the marketplace to help you guys. Now, I know, Dan, we got some really good questions in advance of the meeting, and maybe this kick off, we should maybe look at some of them. Is there any ones that I need to ask you, or how do you want to work it?
No, it's fine. So there's a question that's came in from Kath Staggs. Kath, thank you very much for your question, and it's obviously straight over to you, John.
Yeah.
So the question from Kath is, I'm starting to see an increasing number of landlord clients who have their properties in individual names approach me to talk about the benefits of incorporating. What simple tips would you offer me and other brokers on this, so I'm better equipped to have a sensible conversation about the steps the landlord should take?
Okay. So incorporation is quite frequently tax-driven. And the reason it is tax-driven is the fact that when you move something from a personal ownership to a company ownership, it can crystallise tax charges, right? So there's two key taxes we're looking at. One stamp duty land tax, and one is capital gains tax. When you move your properties from your ownership to a company ownership, properties go across, and the company pays stamp duty land tax on the value of that. It's at standard rates plus the high rate charge, so you get the 3%. And if you're a non-resident, and this does happen, you add another 2% on top of that. Okay. In relation to that, I know there's a lot of talk in the marketplace about partnerships and not having stamp duty land tax charges. That is true in certain circumstances, but if somebody's forming a partnership and then looking to move it straight into a company afterwards, that doesn't work. The stamp duty still applies. So top tip number one is actually if people are thinking about incorporation or setting up a business, joint ownership or that kind of thing, start it as a partnership. Okay. Because 2-3 years down the line, you can relook at it, look at your incorporation, and you stand a much better chance of saving stamp duty land tax.
Now, there's a point I just want to add in on this one, John, that comes a lot, is the moment you hear the word partnership, there's been an awful lot of email communication I think is quite misleading or has doubt is where the partnership is an LLP, which is still in effect a partnership, but the legal ownership is no different whether it's been in an LLP or personal names.
Correct.
But the firms that are doing it, just for you to get that partnership and the UTR reference with it, might charge you £10,000-20,000. And the reason they want to do an LLP isn't because there's any difference between that and a normal partnership that John can help and create, is the fact that people are charged a fortune for this. So you need to really be very clear about when a customer comes to you about being given advice to move into an LLP. One, be very careful you don't give any opinion, because that constitutes tax advice. Right. That could come from John. And two, always get that second opinion, because there's so much about BICs, beneficial interest companies, where there's been a trust deed where it basically transfers the income, the equity, into that limited company that's one of the partners of the LLP.
Yeah.
So we're delving into some quite complexities, but the point is be very careful what you document to a customer that could be constituted tax advice.
Great. From my point of view, there is no difference in tax treatment between an LLP and a standard partnership. And generally, when I'm advising, I prefer a standard partnership because if you're moving from a partnership into a limited company structure, you need a good commercial reason to do so. And adding on the fact that you're looking for limited liability from a standard partnership to a limited company adds another layer of commerciality to it.
Yeah.
And LLPs were actually created professional services. And the reason they were created was you've got partners, accounting firms, legal firms, that kind of thing, who were exposed to unlimited liability, but didn't operate well in limited company structures. And that's the reason for LLPs, that they are not the be-all and end-all from.
And remember, the Ramsey ruling of 2013 defines that business needs to have run for at least 3 years. So 3 years tax returns you've got to do. John, we often get told where people are being to transfer it in 12 months later, you can do it. And the other bit is both parties need to be full-time employed. That definition of full-time employed is more than 20 hours. But if one of you says a mortgage advisor and you really don't do much, it's more passive income, maybe it's your wife, your other half looking after the property, say the 5 or 6 street houses that don't really need a lot of intervention, servicing becomes a key aspect of the test that the revenue will apply. But I think they're very much like rocking horse. It's very, very, I should say unicorns. Why do I say rocking horse? It's unicorns. Very few people qualify. This is why you would need to speak to John. But also, John, an individual who's maybe running a portfolio of 20 buy-to-lets who is their full-time profession, there's a variation to incorporation tax relief, but the stamp duty rules are not done where they're also don't have to pay that. But you can do multi-dwelling relief. It depends, again, on the properties.
So we touched on a few things there, Roger, moving very nicely into the capital gains streams. So the incorporation relief we're talking about there, the 20 hours, is all about saving capital gains tax. And so, you're absolutely right. If you're running a business, there's a possibility you can save the capital gains tax. So top tip number 2 is to work out whether you're running a business or whether it's passive income. Because if you incorporate and you're running a passive income, you pay the capital gains tax. If you're running a business, you have the option to save the capital gains tax, but you might decide not to. And the reason you might decide not to is selling the property to a company creates a director's loan equity in the properties, and that can be drawn out tax-free. So top tip number 3 is do the maths. Yeah, is it worth your while to incorporate, pay or save the stamp duty, claim incorporation relief or not, have that director's loan, which you can then extract in a more tax efficient way. So those would be, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but those would be my top tips.
And my one top tip that I would give from the mortgage side that's so often forgotten, John, is to do incorporation tax relief. All properties have to be transferred into the limited company on that specific day. And so often, mortgage advisors are that busy trying to mitigate stamp duty and capital gains, forget about early repayment charges. And early repayment charges, Dan, can be 3-5%, possibly even higher with some of the new buy-to-let rates. So again, sometimes you can actually arrange the finance up front and novate the debt. I know you deal with Kent Reliance, and they will, subject to all the tax advice, allow novation of debt. Again, it has to be full approval, but you're able to offer some lenders that have that ability to novate from personal to limited.
Yeah, no, we are absolutely 100% are. And again, it's just about looking at the fees that are involved, the costs associated, and weighing it up. Is it beneficial? Is it cost effective? Because you look at the long-term, short-term goals and just see if it is the right solution. And again, it's not one size fits all. No, in taxation market. That's why someone who is qualified to give advice, good advice, should do so. And it brings us nicely into the next question, or the next part of that question. So Ian Clark, thank you very much for this. Good question. I suppose these are going to be, well, all of this is our personal views, a bit of a compliance point of view. These aren't Tandem's personal, so Alexander and Co's views, it's mine, Roger, John's. So Dave, you'll be happy now I've mentioned that. So will Section 21 kill off buy-to-let, as it would appear that tenants would have more control over a property than the actual owners? And what if a landlord wishes to sell for personal or other reasons?
So at the moment, it's still going through the Houses of Parliament and the Houses of Commons regarding the Tenants Reform Bill. We did a recent session with JMW on this back in November, Dan. As a landlord myself, specifically with a lot of properties in the northeast of England, it gives me real concern. The way that private landlords are related in the wider media is we offer very poor, low quality properties. We treat our tenants terribly. We all on this call would understand why rents have risen dramatically recently, and that's because the cost of funding has gone up significantly, and ultimately a buy-to-let is a business. But when it comes to Section 21, apparently the government have recently made, in the last couple of days, a big investment within the courts for the Section 8 process of eviction. But my argument being is the moment that that stops being a business, and the moment that a landlord now is affected by 156 different pieces of legislation, it really is now landlords voting with their feet. We've seen a significant drop in landlords. There's a report came out today, Dan, which was on about older landlords, anyone over 55. I wouldn't call 55 old. I disappear, and that's because of red tape. I'm restructuring my portfolio for the next phase in my life, and those properties in the north that have more social tenants that do more damage probably than the professional tenants will become harder and harder. We've seen in Scotland where they've had rent controls. What happens is when the property becomes empty, the landlords put the properties up way above the market rent. So if that tenant stays in for 5 years, it'll blend out. So it's working against the system. What I would say is the Act becomes enforced and becomes draconian. I see landlords really start to think whether or not they want to be in this marketplace, which is further going to impound the demand. When a buy-to-let comes on the market, Ian, mine, whether it be in the Midlands or the North, there's on average 30 families desperate to have that as their home. And I think we've got to treat landlords with respect, or be careful what we wish for. It's not the end of buy-to-let, but I think those who have got challenged credit files and low income may find it virtually impossible to be able to rent a private rented property.
No, I agree. I think, obviously, if we look at what's happened over the past few years and hammering landlords, the government, from my point of view, is so that we can get more first-time buyers on the ladder. That's just being counter-effective, because obviously rents have increased. It's harder for people to be able to afford deposits from a savings point of view. And if you look at it from a business and from a lender's point of view as well, on a residential basis, you're not going to lend it out or give money away on the basis that you can get less back, because that's not a good business model, is it? No. So from a rental point of view, with rates going up, you're going to have to pass on the costs. At the end of the day, you're not doing it as a charity. It's not a charity that's renting these properties to the private sector. People need to make money, otherwise they're going to offload these properties. There's going to be even more of a rental shortage. Yeah. It's not going to fix anything, is it? But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens this year, and the current Parliament wants to build the election, whether that's for first-time buyers or rent to life. I think we may see some changes, certainly in the marketplace, to get that goodwill to stay in power.
What I would say, though, Dan, is what I am seeing when I look at, say, the last set of applications in Brierley Hill and just on the outskirts of Birmingham, a lot of the applicants were those that have come to this country in the last couple of years. So when we look at immigration, 650,000, the family that was successful was a couple who've only been in this country the last 2 years. One is a top heart specialist, and the wife, is a top cancer specialist, both with incredible academic qualifications, desperate to get a home for the family, providing much needed skills within the NHS. And again, it's getting harder and harder for those people wanting to come to the UK and establish roots, as well as those families that have been on the waiting list of social housing, which I do not think is as good or well maintained as private housing. Now, I know I'd say that, Dan. John, do you have any views? Because you deal with a lot of...
I do. It's not so much... whatever happens, there is tax on all these transactions. So if you've got people purchasing, you've got stamp duty, you've got landlords exiting the market, they need to tax costs for doing so. There might be opportunities. They may be creating capital losses, but those so that they can utilise those capital losses against future gains. It may work out effectively for them to restructure their business in some way, shape or form. And whatever they do on a transactional basis, there will be a tax cost. And they need to think about that as part of any actions that they do take.
Okay, perfect. And transactions, what you mentioned there, brings us well into our next question. So it's all seamless at the moment. So there's an anonymous question that's just came in. What sort of transactions are you seeing now from professional landlords? What type of properties are they purchasing?
That's a good question.
So I'll fill this part, and then there's a question off the back of it for you, John.
Yeah.
So diversity, again, I mentioned previously around yourselves having to diversify, but investors are starting to diversify. Your standard 3-bed semis, which people have historically purchased in sound investment price days, they're not yielding enough for clients to get excited about what to purchase or even retain these. So we're seeing more as a broker, more investors purchasing semi-commercial properties, so flat above a shop, cafe, whatever it may be, commercial, but also seeing a lot more investors diversify the HMO market because of the yield, but specifically into holiday let and Airbnb accommodation. Because we mentioned it on all of these webinars and all of these sessions, it took us for COVID to realise that we actually live in a decent country and we've got some amazing places to visit, and also the cost of travelling overseas at the moment is certainly increasing. So more and more investors are purchasing holiday lets and Airbnb style properties. Now, John, I suppose this question is twofold. What, I suppose, pros and cons is there for an investment for an investor from a tax point of view purchasing commercial property, and also purchasing an Airbnb style holiday let?
Okay, I would agree with that. I would say a lot of my work at the moment is looking at transactions that are a little bit more unusual. Your standard residential property landlord is less common. So on those two aspects, so commercial property, the benefits to commercial property. So residential property, you're paying 28% capital gains. On commercial property, you are paying 10 or 20% capital gains. Commercial property, a different stamp duty land tax regime. So you're paying a maximum of 5% rather than the 8%. There's no additional stepped up. Mixing in a commercial property with a residential property and doing a transaction together can eliminate the higher rate stamp duty. And overall, there is a much more favourable VAT regime in terms of commercial property. And the other big benefit of commercial property, we'll talk about diversity, we'll actually talk about diversity of financing, is certain pensions can buy commercial property. So basically, you put commercial property in your pension, having funded up from, say, a business or something like that, getting tax relief on the contributions, and then getting rental stream into your pension, all of which goes tax free.
So is that a purchase by a SIP?
SIP or a SAS. Yeah, a SIP is a self-invested pension fund. It's a single pension fund that you have to put money in. A SAS is often used by family businesses, and it's like a collective SIP. So it's a bigger pension pot for a small number of people. The benefit of that is you can pool a lot of funds, get a bigger commercial property.
Okay.
Yeah. Holiday lets. Holiday lets, again, considered to be a trade. Now, to purchase a holiday let, you've got to follow within specific rules. So it's got to be let for a certain amount of time, it's got to be available for let for a certain amount of time. It's got to be furnished holiday let, which means it's got to be furnished to a standard that's livable. Yep. Well, provided you meet those rules, the business and the company that ultimately may be in qualify for what's called business asset disposal relief. So that's a 10% rate of tax on your first £1 million disposal. It's deemed to be a trade. So you can claim it's called capital tax relief for your fixtures and fittings, which you can't do on a residential property. Those are the benefits and trading income.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is then, as a summary, a lot of benefits involved.
Potentially.
Yep. But again, not always.
Not always.
In every sort of situation.
Indeed.
Brilliant. Dan, can I make some points on that? Because the reason I want to cover off the point was there was a piece of legislation, I was just trying to quickly find it. When we look at Airbnbs are now becoming the number one focus for the likes of London, Edinburgh, New York have outlawed Airbnb, where you are converting what is, in effect, a residential property. The first reason is why. Well, there's 2 points. One, by you converting what was a 6 months long-term let property to short-term let, you will reduce the amount of availability when it comes to family homes. And secondly, you reduce hotel occupancy and therefore income for the cities. So what happened was a piece of legislation came in from the 1st of October last year. If you've got a privately owned residential property that you want to put out on Airbnb on a short-term let, it needs to conform to the new occupancy regulations. In other words, it needs fixed fire doors, which if you've got a 3-bedroom semi and you put fire doors in, if the self-closers aren't that good, they really do bang and change the tone, particularly when the look of it, Dan, because you've got those self-closers and you've got to get the fire strips down. And it costs a lot of money. It's about $4,000 to convert a standard 3-bedroom property. You've got to have fixed wired emergency lighting and smoke detectors. And the fines that if you are renting properties out on that basis is massive. The reason that a lot of landlords moved to short-term Airbnb, particularly in our cities like Wolverhampton, as well as London and Edinburgh, is because you're able to offset 100% of the interest rate, whether privately owned. But now the consequence implications of landlords renting properties out on Airbnb, we've now seen a big drop in availability in London, hence why we're now seeing rents drop on long-term lets, as more landlords have realised the consequences of, one, you're not allowed to rent a property for more than 90 days in London on a short-term let, and the new legal requirements for those properties, Dan. So we're now seeing rent start to drop in London as this has changed. So be very careful if you're advising your customers on having the properties on a short-term let. The lender needs to know, because if the lender doesn't know, then therefore it's not insured, Dan. So if something happens to the property, the insurance will walk away and the fines are massive. That's one key point. The other point was, what are landlords doing? What I am seeing now, Dan, is landlords like myself looking at multi-units. So we'll be able to buy a converted Victorian property. There's one that I've just done where I'm actually buying that block, and the bridging or the conversion works were actually organised by you and Crystal. A lot of investors like myself at my age don't want to get involved in the renovation. I can't be bothered now. But the quality finish, because the building regs and the time taken was a Victorian house converted to 8 one-bedroom flats. And therefore, it's easier to maintain kind of all your eggs aren't necessarily in one basket, but the returns specifically in cities like Birmingham, the rent returns can be twice as much as the north. So don't go off the headline gross income, look at the cost of repairing those properties. They would be my observations.
No, 100%. And what you just said there in relation to conversions, we're seeing a lot more landlords purchase properties and convert them, whether it's commercial to residential units, and those sort of transactions. And we send out, this is a shameless plug for our marketing team, we send out some great content now on our weekly emails in relation to what products are available in the marketplace, what needs they will satisfy for clients. So if you're not already signed up to our mailing list, please do so, because some great educational content in there, but also if you do have these seasoned investors that are looking to diversify or make a little bit of extra cash and purchase these derelict buildings or properties at auction that need a little bit of work, there's really good vehicles in there to get and diversify their portfolio. So no, thank you, chaps. Some really good content there. There's another few more questions which I'm trying to relatively aimed at me here. However, I'm sure you'll have a few comments, and I'm sure you will, Rog. So we're often, this is from Linda Cleves. Linda, thank you very much. Often we get inquiries from companies wanting to buy the units they rent. They don't have big deposits. Is there anything out there for these clients? In a word, yes, but no. So, and I'll elaborate on that. So for a standard commercial deal, you're looking at 65 to 70% LTV realistically, based on that asset and loan amounts. However, if there's something in the background, whether that's residential property or an investment property, then we can always capital raise against that. Now, remember, from what I mentioned at the beginning, we don't and won't just look at that transaction based on what you told us. We'll look and cast our net wide and what's available from that client from an assets point of view. Some great products out there at the moment for these self-employed clients wanting to purchase, say, warehouses, shops, whatever that may be, doing a non-consent, so not consent, a limited company second charge loan on their residential property, unregulated loan.
Wow.
Yeah, really, really good.
Say that again.
So, a limited company second charge against their residential property. So with that, it's a non-regulated transaction used for business purposes, but they can then use that if there's enough equity in their residential property to use it as a deposit for their commercial purchase. And there's also other things out there available. That's the first one which comes to mind, which has hit the market really, really well. So limited company second charge for wanting to purchase or use for business purposes.
I bet John's got a different angle on this.
I do have two angles. I had an earlier conversation. Check if there's a pension kicking around.
Were you going to say that, John?
Yeah. So if there is a SIPP or a SAS can buy an interest in commercial property. The company can fund up. You're talking doesn't have big deposits, but the company can fund up the pension. There's corporation tax relief available on the deposit of the funds from the company to the pension. The pension, so link straight back to the borrowing, can borrow up to 50% of its value, yes, in order to purchase the property. And the rental stream going from the company to the owner's pension is tax deductible in the company, provided it's a market rate, and not taxable in the pension until it's drawn down. So I've frequently used SIPs and SASs to make a commercial property purchase, and it doesn't have to be the whole of the building. You can buy an interest in, so you can split it between the company and the pension if that's what you want to do.
So, Linda, I think the point, I'm just going to ask John on your behalf. If Linda is a mortgage advisor,
yep.
And we're now talking about pensions and pensions advice, Linda won't be able to quantify that. I suppose she could ask the customer, do you have X in your pension? Let's say they got 200 grand in the pension.
Mm-hmm.
One, would 200 grand work? And then two, who would need to be involved to work on that? Because obviously Linda, I'm just guessing at this, hasn't got those pension permissions.
No,
John.
so you would most definitely need to speak to an independent financial advisor.
Yeah.
Accountants, tax advisors are specifically prohibited by our regulatory body from giving financial advice.
Yeah.
I can talk about it in terms of tax benefits available. But no, you would most definitely need to speak to an independent financial advisor. In overview, this isn't financial advice. In broad terms, 200 in the pension, it can borrow another 100. If that's not enough, it can buy a part interest in the property, which may be able to be funded elsewhere. So sort of like 40-50 split with the company itself.
So there is a deal to be done. Further information needs to be available. Good point, Dan.
No, and that's it. There's always a deal that can be done. It's just about understanding the full picture. If you're an IFA on this, you're doing the full financial advice piece, the full fact finding and gather all that information. So when people come to us and assume that deal's dead and they're pushing out the straws, 90% of the time it's actually not, but it has to be structured a little bit differently. We have to use an external asset which has not been brought to the table. But if the client wants that commercial property enough or to that AAP solution, they will put into that deal whatever they want or whatever they can. It's just all about the client motivation, but asking the right questions to get the right responses is paramount in these sorts of situations. Martin Melton's asked a question, looking to understand how you can go about a satisfied IVA for a first-time buyer with minimal deposit.
So when it comes to an involuntary arrangement, first of all, it does need to be satisfied, and you need to make sure you've got that full satisfaction that they're out of an IVA. But an IVA, in effect, can be treated the same as discharge from bankruptcy. So if we take Tandem wouldn't be able to lend to someone like that until the IVA has been satisfied for 3 years. There is lenders out there that you'll be able to do on the sourcing system that Crystal will also have details on, where as long as the IVA is satisfied. But most of those lenders will only lend to an average around 85, potentially 9% if it's just been discharged. Lenders like Tandem, just for an understanding of deposit, will do equity gift from a family member, where maybe you want to buy Nan's buy-to-let, or a family gift, cash gift from a family member. But the other one is lenders like Tandem will allow a personal loan. So why would they have a personal loan? Possibly they had two cars on car finance, they sell one car, but they keep that personal loan because they can use that towards or as their deposit. We'd be happy as long as that income was put in as in the affordability calculator and passed to make quite a difference. But there is different lenders will have different risks and appetite, but that's something that there will be a solution out there. But you wouldn't get that, in my opinion, at 95%.
No, and I think the first time buyer that is in an IPA, depending on what put them in that place, and if there's been a serious life event, then who would want to lend to that sort of client? Because is it classed as responsible lending? The fact that they're not being able to manage the funds when they haven't got this debt or these properties or this property hanging over their head. There are lenders out there that will lend to clients that are currently in IVA. Again, it's going to be a restricted LTV, it's say circa 7% LTV, but at these higher LTVs, and I mean above 85% LTV, you're going to have to be pretty 6 years, I would assume.
Yeah.
Just going off our lender panel. There's lenders that will do it, but obviously each stage down based on the recency. Like I said, there are lenders out there that will lend to clients at 70% that are in a current IVA, but high LTV, recent satisfied IVA. I don't think anyone in the marketplace would be, it's stupid enough, a bad way of saying it, but would want to take that risk given client's situation, dependent on a life event, because you can't guarantee what's happened, but usually there's some sort of life event that has got them to that position, or they've been a daft kid at university that's whacks loads of money on a credit card, so you can have that on TV and bought a lot of it. Not that I did that.
But just one last point, Dan, before you go on to the next good question, and the questions are coming in thick and fast, was when Tandem Bank launched last year doing day one discharge bankruptcies, for instance, what we found was with them and IVAs was when we actually looked at the credit that the client had ever had, they'd never made any contractual payments. They just took out loads of credit, just didn't pay, and went into an IVA or went bankrupt and then come out and gone, ta-da, we now want you to lend us money on a mortgage. And I think you yourself as the advisor need to look and think, would you recommend, because it's your regulation, your FCA permissions that says, yeah, these people will and are able to maintain those commitments and that roof over the head. So I think the onus needs to be on both sides. Sometimes you've just got to walk away and give them some education. Dan, what was the next question?
Next question is in from Ian Clark. Ian, I love this question. Thank you. So does Crystal Specialist Finance do regulated, non-regulated?
It's a really good question.
Ian, not only do we do regulated and non-regulated bridging, compliance listening, on non-regulated bridging, we will not be beaten by anybody in the marketplace. By that I mean lenders, other packages, brokers come to us with legitimate terms on a non-regulated bridging deal, and we'll beat that quote.
It's a bit like the Tesco price promise. So as long as you bring a quote from any other lender or any other broker, Crystal on non-reg bridging will offer to beat this.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Can't see it on regulated because compliance will kill. On regulated transactions, again, we've got access to the best market rates. And the beauty of this is, and the beauty of everything that we offer from a product point of view, whether it's bridging, commercial development, residential, buy-to-let, second charges, you can do this on a packaged or referral basis. So by that I mean you can have full involvement or no involvement because you don't understand that sector of the market. You're just simply not interested.
Dan, that's really good because I know there's brokers on here that their network doesn't give them permission to do bridging. So you've just had a phone call, they need short-term lending, but they're not allowed to do it. So they could just ring up, pass it over, you will give the advice and they can then receive the fee.
100%, yes. You'll still receive the same percentage of the profits if you've been involved in the deal. So for me, it's working smarter, not harder. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, have that partner that you can trust and work in tandem with.
We don't do bridging, though.
No, you don't do bridging. But yeah, so we absolutely do. We do everything specialist apart from later life lending, which is something that we're not interested in at this moment in time. But never say never. So yes, we do regulated and non-regulated. And also expat and foreign national is a big piece which we're seeing at the moment. So we're seeing a lot of network advisors coming to us with residential properties for expats and investment properties for expats and foreign nationals, because they can't place the cases themselves. So the UK property market's seen as a safe haven. Obviously, exchange rates are good, so bringing money to the UK is cheaper now than historically it was. But the networks will not allow you to give advice, and you cannot give advice to clients that aren't on UK soil. I think we're one of maybe 3 or 4% of the market that can advise clients that aren't in the UK. So we're seeing an increase in this. Bringing this to John, what difference is there for expats and foreign nationals from a tax point of view that hold properties in the UK?
Right.
If that is a question.
It is most definitely a question. And I might use it as a comfortably.
The shares are right, yeah.
Okay, no worries. So, I alluded to it earlier. On stamp duty, if you've got a non-resident, right? So tax looks at things like not residents and non-residents. You pay tax in the UK if you're a tax resident. You don't pay tax in the UK except on certain things, property being one of them if you're non-resident. Right. So a non-resident purchasing has an additional 2%. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Expats, so previously residents in the UK, going abroad, non-residents previously didn't have to pay capital gains tax for disposal of UK properties. Now they do. But in terms of residential property, it is only on the increase in value from April 2015. And in terms of commercial property, it is on the increase in value since April 2019. Right?
Yeah.
So actually becoming an expat, you may, if you've got a long-held property, be able to sell that property and actually wipe out a decent amount of your gain. Okay. You still get main residence relief if it was basically your main residence. The period it was your main residence, a little bit more at the end. But for an expat particularly, they need to be away for 6 complete tax years in most circumstances. Otherwise, the gain becomes fully taxable on the return back to the UK. Yep. Very good. That's it. It's quite a lot in it, but
is this all on an individual basis, or is it covering?
So it covers if there's individuals holding properties through limited companies, and it's what's called a property intensive company, then yes, it covers limited companies as well. And the other thing to note is that, as I say, generally you're not taxable in the UK if you're not non-resident, but because property is attached to the UK land mass, it's deemed to be UK cited income. Okay. So you are taxable on UK rental income. And there's a regime known as the non-resident landlord regime. So technically speaking, a tenant is meant to withhold 20% of their rental as interest, as tax, handover, unless you're registered for gross payment status, forms and all that kind of thing. In which case you would have to do an annual UK tax return.
Okay, fine. And do the rules change if the limit? I mean, this probably won't test you. If there's a limited company held by one director shareholder being an expat and one being resident.
Right. So the UK company being the UK registered entity is the entity that would pay the rental. Yeah. And then on disposal of properties or the shares, yes, it would depend on where the individual was resident. So let's say you've got a disposal of the shares in the company, it's a property intensive company. Your UK resident individual is paying tax on the basis of the disposal of the shares, or your non-resident individual with the property intensive company, it gets a whole lot more complicated involving 20 valuations and all that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that.
Wow.
But yes, expats and foreign nationals, we do them, we can help, you can refer them, you can earn. It's as simple as that. Which, final question on expats and foreign nationals, potentially. Paul Rhodes has asked a question. Who will accept deposits from family in Iraq?
Well, that's a really hard one from a lender point of view. First of all, I would check with your compliance department. That's the first stop. If you're part of a network, ask them for what their view would be on Iraq and just the quantification of the money laundering rules. It's within those areas of countries that Tandem wouldn't be able to allow that deposit to come from. It would only be sort of European countries with certain exemptions, possibly America or possibly Canada or Australia. But when it comes to Dubai, when it comes to Iraq, it's literally about how those funds have gone. But I'd first check with your own compliance department. Regardless of that question, that's where I would start. But when it comes to the lenders, I don't know, Dan, of any lender that would allow that to deposit.
We just need to be confident with the source of wealth, source of funds, and be able to have that paper trail as to where they have originated from. Obviously, not to. We can. We've done it for several high-risk countries, and as long as there's not sanctions against that individual as such, then we can do it. But it's just being confident in the source of funds, and not to add the stereotype to Iraq, but obviously a lot of that could be money from the black market. Obviously, crypto is becoming a big thing now, where there's lenders out there that accept crypto as a deposit, which we're not covering off today. We have covered off in the past, so we can do a separate one on that. But the world's changing. Money's coming from different places. We're also seeing income coming from different places. We got our first case in the UK for a business over in America where people film videos and we'll stop there. But it was only fans, which is we got our first case in. But again, lenders are taking more of a stance, and we will look at deposits from Iraq, but it's just, can we provide source of funds and source of wealth? 99% of the time we can't, or we won't be satisfied from a lender's point of view, but never say never.
No, just one point we could always put in there, Dan, is if, say, the person who was giving the funds from Iraq worked for Shell, and let's say Shell had oil rights in Iraq, I'm just sort of spitballing this, and you would be able to evidence that the income that they derived because they worked in the oil refineries, they were employed by Shell, but because they were living abroad, they didn't have to pay UK tax. And you could absolutely evidence 100%, your compliance department could potentially make an exemption, and potentially you might find a lender on that basis to make an exemption where you've got an international company that income would substantiate within the UK. But I do think you might find that quite a challenge.
No, definitely 100%. Right, we've got 7 minutes left. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is just give out some top tips for brokers to increase their business volumes and just help more clients and not just be so transactional. So who would like to go first?
Let John go first.
Okay, top tips for brokers to increase business volumes. Right, so I guess a lot of my advice at the moment is around inheritance tax. Okay, planning around inheritance tax, because property is an absolutely terrible asset for an inheritance tax, and it gives rise to an awful lot of transactions in terms of having to try and shelter that property. Right, so if brokers have got a kind of understand, the value of any form of property is in your estate for inheritance tax purposes, and on passing, up to 40% of that value could be lost to the government, resulting in things like sale of properties at a loss, because you've just got to fund it up. So it's a question of, it's not just working with other advisors. So one, making sure your clients have got wills in place. If they haven't got wills in place, getting that sorted out rapidly. Two, have they got a plan for succession and inheritance tax? And understanding that things like gifts to family members of property gives rise to tax on individuals. Okay? Now, there is a payoff on inheritance tax, which actually a lot of brokers do benefit from. Yes, you pay capital gains tax on transfer of properties. That can be on your corporation, business, can be on family members, right? But you're paying capital gains tax on the increase in value of property at 28% or 20% of property, as opposed to 40% on the value of the whole property, right?
Yeah.
You can then structure these things, and we've chatted about it before, into family investment companies whereby the growth of those properties can go into a trust, right? Structure, right? but making sure your clients have a decent thought out inheritance tax plan can lead to volume in transactions, because you may need to borrow to fund short-term capital gains tax charges against a decent portfolio, whilst adding value to your clients and saving a small fortune.
Okay. I think the main thing from that is actually understanding it and being able to explain it to the client that actually might be a short-term cost, not long-term investment. Okay, perfect. Yeah, Christine Sims has just said, I think we need a whole new session on inheritance tax and tax. We're happy to do so. Anything that you guys want us to cover after today, when Dave sends it, Dave, our head of marketing, who's fantastic, by the way.
Very fantastic.
Apart from a few technical issues today, Dave. So
yeah, it wasn't so good. I think he had white tea this morning.
Yeah, I think he must have had a late night. Anyway, anything that you want us to cover in sessions that we can get content done or as much as possible, please do fill in the feedback forms when Dave sends it across to you, because again, these sessions are for you. If you think they're crap, we want them to change so that you're captivated and ultimately you want the content to be as soon as possible. What are the top tips for advisors for you, please, just quickly?
Your customers need you more than ever before. We've seen with Santander confirming now that more product transfers are going back to the broker than what previous used to go direct to the lender, because customers want to have that extra bit of confidence about what you are currently able to offer. When you have a customer, say, is 3 years left and a 5-year fix, what's the point of going back and reviewing their mortgage? Absolutely. For 2 reasons, Dan. What I would be saying to them is being able to guesstimate what their new fixed rate would be if they were coming off today. What is the point of doing that? Then they can make strategic unsecured commitment decisions now, knowing what that payment shock could be, would be, and help them kind of pre-budget for how much extra money will have to be going into their mortgage. And then the next would be, if your customers wanted a capital raise now, but they're on a really cracking low 5-year fix, that's where the secured loan becomes really appropriate. Tandem is the UK's #1 leader when it comes to second charges. And there's a whole department within Crystal Specialist Finance to keep in front, keep relevant, and keep communicating at least once a month digitally.
No, 100%. You're right there. I think a lot of your jobs as advisors are more getting people mortgage ready rather than doing a mortgage application. It's more about babysitting and the steps that you're helping them to get to that point of having a mortgage, even if they do get there, they may or may not. Which times that could be spent actually sourcing and scouring the market for new business. And also with the PT market being so big and paying so little this year, and your income has dropped 20-30%, if not more, for some advisors. My top tips would be diversify. The residential clients that you've got that are self-employed, give them a call, drop them an email. Do you have any commercial needs? Dead straightforward. If you can do that, and you've got obviously a CRM system, do it. Because guess what? If they're going elsewhere for their commercial deal, their residential mortgage is going with them as soon as that is up for renewal, because they remember the last transaction, who did that last transaction. And these sorts of sectors, if you don't want to get involved in whether it is commercial, whether it is bridging or even second charges, refer across Crystal. As Rog mentioned, we've got our dedicated teams, dedicated sectors that are experts. And you may not be a subject matter expert because you don't do bridging, you do one every 3 years, or commercial. You're not interested in learning about commercial, but you just want an avenue, which isn't Dave from down the pub that gets you a pint on a Friday night, that pays you fairly, gives the best possible service to your client. Guess what? You're not going to lose a deal. We've also started doing third-party pieces to the transactions that we deal with at Crystal, which we've got a great addition to our team. It's not new, but Mark Hutchins, who's our head of strategy and projects. We're doing third-party ancillary things now, so looking at things like insurance. If you don't do commercial insurance, guess what? Mark and his team will. Looking at stamp duty reclaims and a vast array of other different opportunities are available within Crystal, because, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not just about that transaction for that client. What else can we do for that client that's going to put them in a better stance, save them a bit of cash, and get them where they need to be? If you haven't already reached out or spoken to Mark, then I'm sure in the future, if you have a case with Crystal, you will have the opportunity to speak to Mark, speak to his team, and he'll help sort your client out with insurance if it's not something like you do, and also potentially save your clients a ton of money, in good stance with them for the next transaction that they're wanting to do. But for me, it's all about diversifying in 24. If you want to survive, if you want to increase your income levels, it's about looking at different product verticals than you're active in now. And it's as simple as that for me. John, Ian has asked one final question, and that's all we've got time for today, folks. So, didn't want to miss you out, John. No one ever misses you out, do they? You are the short point. Are you able to advise on capital gains tax across borders, England and Northern Ireland?
So, yes, I am, because England and Northern Ireland aren't cross-border. They're all UK taxes. If you're talking outside of the UK, which includes Northern Ireland, yeah, you can still advise on that as well.
Perfect. Brilliant. Right, closing remarks, Rog.
Guys, thank you all for registering, for logging on, and thanks for the questions, the feedback, and the comments. It makes an awful lot. If you've got any other points that you want us to cover, we'll take that forward. We'll look at capital gains. Another one is how to best sell your business. So you've all got brokerages. What happens if you've got aspirations to grow them, and how best to structure them for the advent of a sale? That's another area we're going to pick up on. I think we'll have a lot of interest, even if you've just got a normal, well-run business that you're never going to sell. But it's a question of what happens if you did, and how best to exit that business. That's another point I think got coming down.
Yeah, and that's another one for John to cover off as always, because he's the star attraction. But yeah, thank you all very much for joining and taking the time out of your day. We will be back in April for episode 2 of this fantastic series. Please do register, please do ask questions, and let us know what content you want to cover. But for now, from Manchester, that's it from the three of us. Have a great day, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.